Good morning. It is 6:11, and here we are on this Friday, June 12th. Tomorrow's my wife's birthday. I better do something. We knew it was coming up. But we also have a lot of other things happening this weekend. We have graduation for our high school, which is going to be unique and special. We have the His Songs, the Southern Gospel group, going to be with us on Sunday. And again, in each one of those situations, we are going to do our best to maintain good guidelines and do things according to protocols during this coronavirus. Let's get into our study today. We're going to be continuing our study of Jonah, but we've taken a sidetrack. We're looking at Jonah, who has left the presence of the Lord. And all of us as parents struggle with what to do with children, whether young or old, and when they leave the Lord, when they leave our positions, where they leave where we were, okay? And the prodigal is that individual. I think personally, as a parent, maybe you could give me some advice if you want. You can give me some of your thoughts on this. I find parenting to be the most difficult for me as my children get of age where they make their own decisions without me, and or they make decisions contrary to what they have been instructed to do or have their mother and I have laid out as a pattern. Maybe you're the same way. Some of our children get to the place where they actually become in the biblical vernacular, the prodigal. They have departed the faith. And we're going to look at what does that look like? How does that look like? What are some things that we can do? Now, what I'm going to get into today from the prodigal and a couple other places is the principles. But we must be spirit-led, because even though this is a principle, God is not going to be locked into the principle per se. He is going to give us guidance in every situation on what to do. But I do see today a lot of parents going against the principles, and that's why I want to bring this up. We have parents today who they've forgotten that God has given them a responsibility to be the child's parent, not their friend. Does that make sense? Instead of being the one they pal around with, God has instructed us as parents to be the friend like Jesus was to Judas. Just say what it is, kindly, lovingly, but don't let them go away from it, okay? And so we're going to look at a couple of things here. But to begin with the prodigal, I want to ask you, who does the father represent? Who does the father represent in the story of the prodigal? And I think all of us would conclude the father represents God. And he's the one is the action one a lot here. We see the story of where the prodigal goes with his decision, but it's really the father that we ought to be focusing on. What is he doing through this process? So let's remind ourselves of where we are. So we're back in Luke chapter 15, verse 11. And he, the son, and he said, a certain man had two sons. And the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. And he divided unto them his living. And not many days after, the younger gathered all together and took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his father's substance and with riotous living. Okay, so here's where we get the word prodigal. It's not in the Bible. It is the word waster. That is what the prodigal means, a Latin word that means waster. And so this son is the waster. Okay, now, remember also the word them. The father at this point decides to divide up his living, or as we would, I think, say today, his inheritance among his two sons. Don't ever forget that the other son isn't doing what's right at the end. Okay, you have the one son not doing what's right at the beginning, but then you have the other son not doing what's right at the end. And this is a parable to reflect that there are those two classifications. There's those that don't finish so well or start so well, but they finish well, and there are those that start well but don't finish well. Okay, so we have to be mindful of that. Let me just throw out a observation. Heard this from Dr. Dobson many years ago from Focus on the Family. Never ever forget about where your compliant child is. We all have children that tend to draw more of our attention and more of us having to focus on because of their behavior, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have the compliant child, and you're just so thankful, so thankful, so thankful. Don't ever forget about the compliant child. The compliant child could be doing just what the other child is doing inwardly, and it shows up later. Okay, it would just show up later, and so we have to always be mindful of that. So here's where we're going to go with the parent. The parent here, what we see today with parents, especially as the children get older, is they enable. You know that word, right? They enable. Let me share two quick stories with you. One is the guy that played Archie Bunker, Connor. His son had a tremendous drug problem, and he after his son overdoses, his Archie says, "Hey, here's my mistake. He said I loved him too much, but what he was saying is I enabled him. I enabled him. It caused it to get worse, not better." And I have I know another couple that have helped their son to nearly $500,000, and the son still ended up in jail. You see, there comes a place where you've got to be careful not to enable. And so the father here divides the living, but he's not going to partake in it. He's not enabling them. He's giving what the children had due, the sons had due, but he's not enabling. If I could say it this way, he's basically saying he's not going to have a part. Here, take it, but I'm not having a part. I'm not going to keep feeding this. Here's your part. You get no more, and then off he goes. And this is what he goes. So the father is not encouraging his son's behavior, but he is choosing not to have a part. And this reminds me of Psalm 1, right? Psalm 1 tells me a couple of things. Sorry, I've got a couple of passages we will look at. Psalm 1 says, "Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scorner. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water." But notice what happens to the ungodly. The ungodly are not so, but they are like the chaff which the wind driveth away. All right? And this is a picture of what I think the Father's doing. He's saying, I'm going to stay right here. I'm going to stay where I've always been. I'm going to be like the tree planted. But what's happening to the son? The son is being blown. He's been driven away. Okay, so there's a picture of godliness, and there's a picture of righteousness. By the way, this father, we never see his emotion. We know his concern. We see his compassion. But he didn't lose his happiness, because God promises that I can still be happy in spite of what's going on around me, right? He says, blessed is the man who. And so I'm going to presume that this man can still be happy, even though there is a sadness. Don't get me wrong. There's a sorrow, but that doesn't mean it's something that's going to ruin my life. I can continue to go on and do what needs to be done. Now, the other part that we look at here is also from the book of Proverbs, where he says, "My son, if sinners entice thee to consent thou, if they say, come with us, let us wait for blood, let us do this, let us do that." He says, and they want them to cast in thy lot among us. Let us all have one purse. My son, walk not thou in the way with them. Refrain thy foot from their path. So again, the father is not going with the son and enabling him. He's saying, no, I'm not going with you. If that's what you're going to do, that's your business. But he's a proponent of what you've heard me say over and over again: soul liberty and responsibility. Now, that's the principle by which I function. Yes, I have a child that's not where I would love him to be, okay? But I've applied these principles over the years, and that has been comforting to me. I have peace about it, and I want you to have peace about it too. Yes, we are concerned for our children. Don't get me wrong. But the greatest father The greatest parent is God the Father. And he's showing us over and over again that they're just children. They're going to make decisions that are going to go in the wrong direction. Don't enable, and then try not to take it personal. If we've done a mistake, we've created a mistake, we've caused something, then go humble ourselves to him, correct it. But let me give you another principle. What is it that we're after here? What is it that we're after? So I'm going to continue in Proverbs 5, or Proverbs 1 first, and then I'm going to go to Proverbs 5. What is it that we're after here? When we're trying to get to our children, we want this verse 7 to come a play. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but the fools despise wisdom and instruction. My son, hear the instruction of thy father, okay, and mother. Now, this word hear comes up a lot in Proverbs. A wise man will hear and will increase learning. My son, hear the instruction of thy father. Hear, ye children, the instruction of the father. Attend to no understanding. Hear, my son, receive my sayings. Hear me now, therefore, O ye children, depart not from the words of my mouth. Hear, for I will speak of excellent things. Hear instruction, be wise, and refuse it not. Cease, my son, to hear the instruction that causeth to err from the words of knowledge. Bow down thine ear, and hear the words of the wise. Now, this is where I want to go specifically, and it's in chapter number 5 of Proverbs. This idea of bowing the ear. So I'll give commentary here in just a second. Proverbs 5:1 says, My son, attend unto my wisdom, and bow thine ear to my understanding, okay? That thou mayest regard discretion, and that thy lips keep knowledge. Two aspects of parenting have to take place, which I see today that are not happening. One is a reverence for authority, the reverence for the Lord, the reverence for the father or the mother. Excuse me. When we look at what's happening in Seattle today, total anarchy, total disregard for authority. What is that? What should that tell us based upon that verse? No fear of the Lord. No fear of authority. Okay, how did that happen? I'm going to suggest to you that when people don't apply biblical standards and principles, they actually create children who do not respect authority. And as a result, this is what we see. We see the outcome on the other side. They become bloodthirsty. And that's what Proverbs 1 is referring to about those that go out and lay waste and want to seek after people's blood and take their goods. We're seeing a vivid picture of a society, a culture that is void of fear of the Lord. Okay, so that shouldn't surprise us. We're disappointed, but that's where it goes. So as parents, we have to teach that. And that is, I don't have time to get into that today, but Proverbs, again, is a great book for that. But when we get to Proverbs 5, what is the key to that? They need to hear it. How many times have you seen with even your own children or with others, when you're teaching them and you're giving instruction, which is sometimes discipline, they turn their head and they start focusing on something else? What is that child doing? They have stopped listening. All right. So there's two things that a parent needs to do at that point. The first is they get them back, and many times I'll say, look at me. Look at me. And sometimes I have to get a little bit sterner. Look at me or else. Now, what do they fear? They fear the else. But they have now a higher regard for the parent. They now have a higher regard for the parent. Now we're getting into the place of reverence, okay? Respect. Because the Bible says at the beginning of knowledge, the beginning of the wisdom, the beginning of this understanding must start at the place of the fear of the Lord. It's not just feeding them with words. It must start from the heart. And so we have to teach to the heart, okay? Now, what we see then is this dishonoring of parents going on all the time. And how many times does God have to say, honor thy father, honor thy mother, right? Now, notice in the story of the prodigal what eventually happens. We won't get into the details of where he the steps that he goes, but he eventually gets to the place where it says, verse 17, and he came to himself. Let me just a side note real quick. Sometimes parents will ask me to pray for the wayward child, and I say, beware, I want to talk to you about that, because my prayer may not match what you expect. Because I'm going to pray that they get to the pig pen very fast. Because that's where they, come to themselves. I'm going to pray that it gets really bad so that they finally come to themselves. Are you okay if I pray that way? Some of us, it's a catcher. It's like, I didn't know that. Yeah, but that's how people come to themselves. They have to get to a spot. They have to hit rock bottom. And if we keep enabling them in that rock bottom position, they'll just keep doing it. Okay, we're not to be casting pearls to the swine, the scripture says. So we need to be very aware of that, all right? So notice this then when he goes. What are we looking for? Finally, he comes to himself. He says it'd be better to be a hired servant in his father's house. There's the reverence. There's the willingness to come alongside and do whatever. That's what we want to see. Then he arose and came to his father. But when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him, had compassion, ran, fell on his neck, and kisses him. Now, here's a point. When does the father give him all the blessing? The father does not give blessing until he hears this. Notice what happens. So he said, and the son said unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in thy sight, and I am no more worthy to be called thy son. But the father said to his servants, bring forth the best robe and put it on him, etc., etc. This is a 1 John 1:9 practice. If I confess my sins, he is faithful and just to forgive my sins and to cleanse me of all unrighteousness. When that young man or that man comes to his father and humbles himself under the authority of his father, he has shown reverence. And this is what the father's looking for before he gives him authority in the home. This is what the father is looking for. This is what God is looking for, is our total subjection to his will. I am yours. I will do as you ask. I am sorry for what I've done. So when we have children that are wayward, use the prodigal as a pattern as to how to bring them back into the home, how to bring them back into relationship. Okay, we've run out of time today. We'll see you on Monday, God willing, where we can continue back in the book of Jonah. God is so merciful. He's so good to us. All right, so let's go with him. He's worth it, and let him go with us. It will be a blessing. Good day.